Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Story. I am, of course, Daniel Parker, the writer and creator of Angels Awakening, my first comic book that I've successfully crowdfunded. And and of course, you saw the trailer. I'm also the writer on Guardian Angel. Currently, the mailing list is currently up on Indiegogo right now. If you sign up for it, you will have access to a secret tier where you'll be able to buy an alternate version cover. And if you're amongst the first 50 to sign up, you will get a free art print when you back a physical tier. So you want to get on that.
Get in and get in early.
Exactly. All right. Link to that is in the description down below. And of course, joining me as always, my partner in crime here.
Yep, DB Fastbinder, aka Darth Bobcat, with an out-of-season Christmas blanket sitting on his easy chair in the background that he just noticed. To be fair, when someone gives you a Christmassy item for Christmas, it's kind of awkward when you think about it, because it's like, well, this is a perfect Christmas pattern. Thank you for giving it to me on Christmas, or
Yeah.
So I either have to wait until next year to use it, or it's Christmas in January. Anyway,
Yes.
on things that aren't out of season, buying copies of the Magpie Wizard on Kindle.
Yes.
We're up to book 3 there. Book 4 is waiting for a heavy editing pass sometime in March, probably. And book 5 is getting very interesting, if I say so myself. I started posting it for free on Royal Road. So if you look up Confessions of the Magpie Wizard Royal Road, that'll come up online. And yeah, I'm probably about halfway done with it at this point.
Nice. Yeah, I've still got to get through and read that myself. I've got the first 2 books hardcover, or hard copy, I should say, not hardcover, hard copy. And I've also got them on Kindle. So I've got all 3 books on Kindle that you've got so far.
Well, yes, phone. Tuesdays with Story did just start. Thank you for telling me. Anyway,
yes.
anyhow, yep. If you like the cut of my jib, go ahead and give that a look. It's also on Kindle Unlimited.
Yes. Yeah. Link to this is in the description down below, as well as to the Royal Road of Saga of the Storm Wizard, which is the spinoff with Rose, and as well as DB's Patreon. So,
yep. At some point we ought to try to finagle some sort of podcast Patreon, though. Yeah, that can wait till maybe that can be our stretch goal for 100 subs.
Yes.
Launch like a shared Patreon for the podcast.
Sounds like a plan. All right, so for today's show, when DB and I were trying to come up with topics, I asked if we had talked about villains before, because honestly I couldn't remember, and sure enough, episode 13 we had. So for this episode, we were going to talk about basically not necessarily creating a villain, but certain pitfalls that occur that will ultimately ruin a villain, and basically we'll tell you how to avoid all that stuff.
Yep. So first off, I think that what a villain is supposed to be is how you decide if they've been ruined or not. Like a villain for the Pokemon anime is going to be different than a villain for Breaking Bad. They're going to have different levels of seriousness. They're going to have different modus operandi, working with different rules of their universes, and so on. So like if you sorry, just had a little bit of vapor lock for a moment there.
It's all right.
So if you go, oh man, Jesse and James are punks. They haven't killed anybody. It's like, yeah, that's not their point of their characters. The fun of Jesse and James is what ridiculous outfits will they show up in, and what kind of shenanigans will get in their way, and how will they self-sabotage. Uh, Meanwhile, it's like if the Breaking Bad villain's like, man, there hasn't been one giant mecha that they've brought in to fight.
Yeah.
This show's boring. Zero mecha.
Yeah. Yeah. Why isn't Gus Fring in a mecha?
Right. So yeah, you got to make sure that you're not just projecting what you want onto a story.
Hmm.
Like there have been some. I'm sure you've done this before. You're watching a movie or TV show, and you haven't really heard about it, and you're watching, and you think that this little thing over here in the corner is going to be the point of it, and it turns out you've missed the big picture, and it's like, oh, but I like this little corner of it,
Hmm.
and you ruin it for yourself because you're like, but I don't care about this big stuff. I want you to explore that.
Yeah.
Well, darn it, author, why didn't you give me exactly what I wanted?
Yes.
How dare you have your own creative vision?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's very easy to do, when you're because and I will say, as a writer, you really, when you're crafting the story, you really don't know what's going to necessarily know what's going to be what's going to work, what people are going to like, and what people aren't going to like.
Hmm.
For example, George Lucas thought a lot of people were going to like Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, it's the Jar Jar thing is kind of interesting because if you talk with people who were on the set during the filming of episode one, they all really loved Ahmed Best's performance. So I
Hmm.
don't know if that was just like the actors getting into the zone where they were each other's buddies, and so it's like, yeah, it felt like an inside joke with them,
Hmm.
or something was lost in the CGI, or if people just, or if it was just like a, yeah, it's hard to gauge. I feel like there was a version of Jar Jar that could have worked,
Hmm.
but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's easy to, yeah, you never know exactly how they say no plan survives contact with the enemy. No, it's the same thing except replace enemy with audience.
Yeah. And speaking of Star Wars, you had probably one of if not the greatest villain in cinema history in Darth Vader. And you take him, who's the ultimate, the chosen one, the ultimate Jedi master, or
Mhm.
the ultimate Jedi. He was supposed to be this great, the chosen one and all this other stuff, and then he
There to
turns
restore balance to the force.
yes, restore balance to the Force, and then he turns evil, and gets his body horribly burned and everything, and then limbs hacked off, and then he becomes just a megalomaniac. And and the whole reason for it was because of Padme.
Yeah, you could argue that's actually a really interesting case there. So, first off, you can kind of look at it from the perspective of somebody who would be coming to the series, and like, let's say you had like a kid cousin or whatever that you were trying to get into Star Wars. They would probably, it would be very, yeah, that'd be very young for them to not already know the Luke, I am your father thing, just because it's a meme at this point.
Yeah.
So you could possibly surprise them, but it would be very hard. But but somebody new coming into it would end up with a very different perspective of Darth Vader than somebody who started with the original trilogy, and then the prequels came way later.
Hmm.
Just hypothetically, or just as a real example, there are a lot of people out there who kind of feel like the portrayal of Anakin Skywalker in those movies ruined Darth Vader for them, or at least tarnished Darth Vader for them,
Hmm.
because. But I always kind of felt like that was actually a realistic portrayal of what somebody like that would be like. Like, yeah, somebody who was a good man, but with like a dark side a mile wide.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely some personality issues with him. You definitely saw a lot of that in Attack of the Clones. He just
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I, I killed them all, the women and the children too.
Yes. the opposite of what Boba Fett has done.
Uh, uh, I remember I was watching the EFAP watch along of Book of Boba Fett, and they say that they were the only people who were doing live reactions to the episodes who cheered when that Tusken Raider village got destroyed. Spoiler warning. Because they looked at it what I would say is the proper perspective, which is, wait, but these guys were capturing, enslaving people, and working them to death out to dig their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They were taking pot shots at trains, like
Yeah.
they killed and raped Shmi Skywalker,
Yes.
or at least tortured her.
At least, yeah, at the very least, tortured her. Yeah.
They caught Luke in the desert and almost killed him.
Yeah.
When he wasn't doing anything to bother them.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
sand people are not good people. I'm sorry.
No, they're not. And yeah, no matter how much Disney tries to humanize them.
Yeah, the smart thing to do there. Actually, that's another example of a villain getting tarnished.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about it. I was thinking about it on my run, like I often do before these. Half of it I kind of half script in my head sometimes. Like, what are my talking points here? I decided that as far as ruining villains go, there's two ways that can happen. It's either a gradual erosion of what the original concept was, or just an immediate character assassination. And the Tusken Raiders in Book of Boba Fett are a good example of the kind of. Actually, I don't even know if I would. It's hard to say if it counts as erosion of the villain, because it's like the show was unaware that they were still villainous.
Yeah. Yeah, and although you could almost put Boba Fett in there too, because Boba Fett was technically a villain in the original trilogy, and then they've turned him into a hero-like character, and it's not who he was. That's not who he is. And it's not who he was.
Right. Which you could do that, but you'd have to show some. You have to show some reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, his character lines up better if you watch the Clone Wars, but I've only seen a little bit of that.
Yeah, he was in a few episodes, and he wasn't quite as menacing, or he wasn't quite as evil in there because he's still a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And but like I think the first episode they bring him back was he tries to kill Mace Windu, and he doesn't succeed, obviously. And then he does go out and work with other bounty hunters, and he's kind of like they want to do something really like kill somebody or something like that, and he always kind of chooses the more moral way of doing it.
Which is funny for in The Empire Strikes Back, where he was the guy that Darth Vader had to tell to tone it down a bit.
Yeah, no disintegrations.
Yep. Although in retrospect, it's not so much that Vader thought that he was going too far, more that, look, these guys are bait for Luke, so I can't bring him in with a pile of ashes.
Yeah.
So actually, Star Wars is full of all kinds of characters like this, because first off, you've had multiple creative hands on time, including you can almost call old and young George Lucas different creators in terms of their voice,
right?
To an extent. But the cartoons were another example of this. But before I get into that example, let's kind of talk about the erosion thing.
Okay.
So, like we were saying before, villain, like you create a villain with a particular role to play in your story. They are some sort of antagonistic force that is there to hinder the heroes in their objectives. Now, sometimes that can be more direct. Like, what's Batman's objective this episode? Oh, he's trying to bring in the Riddler. So therefore, the Riddler is there to keep Batman from bringing the Riddler in.
Mm-hmm.
Although he also has, side schemes, like, oh, he's trying to rob a bank. He's trying to steal this weird artifact that somehow ties into riddle making. That, you'd think in Gotham they would just like ban museums after a certain point.
Yeah.
Like, look, I'm sorry, we can't. Like the local ordinance signed by the mayor, the "we can't have nice things" law.
Yes.
All museums are required to be relocated to a metropolis.
Yes, all physical hard currency is no longer allowed within the Gotham City limits. It's all got to be electronic.
Yeah, you aren't allowed to have anything with any of the following themes: clowns, birds, penguins, riddles. Uh,
Yeah. No developing dangerous technologies
within the city limits.
within the city limits. Yeah.
But back on point.
Yeah.
So, but most of the, I would say like a lot of villains, especially in genre media, they tend to be like less subtle than in other media. Like say you can have a crime lord who arguably is a pillar of his community because sure he's selling drugs to other communities, but in this community he's reinvesting that money and help propping up businesses and making parks and things like that. So that's complex because you got to think, well, okay, if I take out this kingpin, first off, I've just spawned a gang war, but I've also just cut off this source of money for a problem community, right?
Right.
So the kingpin ultimately is done wrong, but you might have some consequences. That isn't fun for superhero stuff.
No.
Uh, a lot of the time, the villain is just a big, clear bad guy. Oh, hey, Russian bot, our favorite.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah.
but you want a clear, obvious villain that the hero gets to train up and go and beat up and outsmart and or whatever their particular modus operandi is.
Yeah. Yeah, and when give another kind of example of that, I guess if you consider him a hero or not, but in The Godfather with Don Vito Corleone, I mean, and I think it was it was the second movie when they do the flashback to when he's a young man, he's played by De Niro. And everybody's coming up to, oh, Don Vito, wanting, 'cause, he's helping them with their problems and all that, and it's kind of a similar with the whole, well, yeah, if you get rid of this guy, you're destroying the whole community.
Yeah, the best evil is the evil that, or the most effective evil is the evil that takes root. Now, I did say I was going to go back to Star Wars. Let's talk about the Clone Wars a little bit. Now, Clone Wars, serialized TV show, 5 or 6 seasons, I forget which.
Heck, I almost want to say there were 7.
I know they just released like the last of whatever the last season was that had been an animatic and then never actually released, but I forget what season. Anyways, many seasons.
Many seasons.
So, as much as it pains me, what's the point of Star Wars? To sell toys to children.
Yeah.
So, of course, you're gonna bring in noteworthy characters from the prequel trilogy, right? Because you're trying to, it's like, oh man, you want kids to buy those Count Dooku's and those
Obi-Wans and Anakins
and General Grievous's.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, who doesn't want a General Grievous?
I mean, that's a badass character design. I don't care.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
But here's kind of the problem. So there is a ongoing continuous plot, more or less, but most of the episodes are standalone. When you look at the Revenge of the Sith, it does seem like okay, so like Attack of the Clones. Anakin Skywalker fights Count Dooku, loses an arm, gets his butt whooped. Revenge of the Sith, opening scene. To show how much stronger Anakin has gotten, he cuts off both of Dooku's of his hands and then decapitates him.
Yes.
Now, I don't believe that we were meant to think that they had seen each other in person in between point A and point B there.
Mm-hmm.
But and also when Grievous runs into Obi-Wan Kenobi, I think their interactions in that movie, you would totally believe that this was the first time that they had seen each other in person.
Yeah.
Well, I should say second, first time on the spaceship when Grievous was running away, but like first real encounter when Obi-Wan chases him to that pit, planet with a giant pit on it.
Right.
But if you're trying to sell a TV show that's like a midquel,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to stick to that. You're going to have those heroes and villains interacting all the time because you want the kids to want to go, mommy, buy me a General Dooku and a General Grievous so I can make him fight my Anakin and Obi-Wan.
And yeah.
So Grievous is kind of punk in that show from what I saw in the first season, because he's always wrong. He's always, freaking out and, yelling at his sarcastic droid assistants. He's always he's always losing. He's never really ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Dooku does a bit better because they did a smart there where they gave him a apprentice, Asajj Ventress, who could go out and fight on his behalf.
Mm-hmm.
So, but still, they crossed lightsabers on at least a few occasions from what I recall and have heard. So,
yes.
So that's a slow erosion. Like, oh man, Dooku's up here, and they beat him this time. They beat him this time. They beat him this time. They beat him this time.
Mm-hmm.
So then, when you watch that series and then go watch Revenge of the Sith, it's like, yeah, I'm surprised that Anakin didn't cut his hands off before.
Yeah.
And what General Grievous, that punk, that whiny punk, he's supposed to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan and Anakin have faced him before. Now, to be fair, in the actual show, he did murk some other Jedi. So yeah, they did some things to try to unerode because you can like recover from it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's just like it's not quite as big a deal in the actual movie as you think it is, because it turns it from these big climactic encounters to one of a series of encounters.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, and it's pretty easy to see it happen that way. Especially like because that was what got me when I watched it, the first time I saw Revenge of the Sith, and the opening scene, seeing that opening scene where Anakin beats Dooku, I'm sitting going, good lord, he chopped his arm off in the last movie, and now here he is, he just beats him fairly easily. I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah, and that can also backfire. Also, that opening scene, it's weird in that opening scene feels like you needed to watch the old animated Clone Wars shorts to really understand what was going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Which seems like a bad idea to make it so that you had to watch it on Cartoon Network on cable the week before to really get it. But
yeah,
that's neither here nor there. And actually, character erosion is really, really easy to fall into. Just not even for heroes and villains, because it's easy to chase a short-term benefit and not realizing that you're doing long-term damage.
Mm-hmm.
Like an example that occurred to me while I was watching some old Superman episodes with my friends was from the 90s Superman cartoon. There's a scene where Lois walks up to Clark. I don't get it, Smallville. I've lived in this city for 10 years, but you roll into town and suddenly you're scooping me left and right. How do you do it? He just looks around. Well, you see, Lois, I'm secretly Superman, and I pretend to be a newspaper reporter so that I can hear about disasters as they happen. And then I use my super speed to scoop you every time.
Yeah.
And she just looks at him for a moment and goes, "You're a sick man, Kent." Now, the thing is that's a really funny moment when you get down to it. Like that's perfect, because it does underscore, yeah, nobody would ever believe that Clark Kent was Superman.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is that Lois, if she's like a smart, investigative, critical thinker, would at least, you'd think she would at least consider the possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have to wonder why she wouldn't.
Yeah, in my mind, with that, I think it's because he, his persona as Superman and his persona as Clark Kent are are like completely different. I mean, they,
Mhm.
especially in the Christopher Reeve, when Christopher Reeve played him, like his, when he plays Superman, he's strong, he's confident, he's all all those things, and then when he's Clark Kent, he's like, oh golly, Lois, I don't know, so it helps to have that kind of like I just say kind of wimpy persona.
There is that. And it's like as a one-time gag, it works.
Hmm.
But if you suddenly every other episode Clark was trolling Lois with like, "Oh yeah, I'm totally Superman," and she didn't ever start wondering why he kept joking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, if it became a running gag, uh would have failed. Yeah.
Yeah, but and so is the problem with villains is once down the gag path you start, it's hard to get out of it.
Hmm.
So like there is a villain from Marvel Comics called the Rhino. He's a big buff guy who wears a radioactive rhino pelt or something. I forget what exactly they did to make him super strong, but we're talking about a guy who can trade punches with the Hulk for a while before he inevitably loses, fighting Spider-Man. So that should be like a top tier threat, right?
Hmm.
There was a time in the 2000s where like editorial did not know how often Rhino was appearing, or it seemed like they didn't know or didn't care. Uh,
Yeah.
like he was showing up every week. New heroes they were trying out would beat him. He'd randomly like he would be a villain that Spider-Man would beat while he was thinking about the real problem that week.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Like he,
Similar to Batroc the Leaper.
oh yeah, like a character who, in theory, like they're very dangerous character. Like he can bounce around like nobody's business and kick. His leg doesn't immediately shatter when he kicks Cap's shield, which is impressive when you think about it.
Hmm. Yeah.
But because you treat him like a joke villain often enough, it just completely removes whatever cool factor was there.
Hmm.
Which, like from like a superhero comic level, a giant Rhino man is a cool visual.
Hmm.
But you over time, like he went from being like a thug to just being a complete dumbass. They actually did a Flowers for Algernon story that was really good, where he wished to have more brain power, and you got to see what would actually happen if the Rhino was smart.
Yeah, and speaking of villains taken in that direction. So some of you know I've been kind of watching the old '80s Ninja Turtles comic cartoon, and I've also been reading the old Mirage comic books. I've been buying the trade paperbacks, and so you have the character of Shredder, of course, the main turtle villain, and in the comic books, he's just a real evil dude, and just hardcore ninja guy, and and although maybe not as menacing because the turtles beat him in the in the first issue, and if you go and you watch like other stories with the turtles, they have a really hard time fighting Shredder, and yeah, and so but when you have the cartoon show, Shredder, he's pretty evil in the first the first season, but
Mhm.
then after a while he gets more and more comical, and to the point where he's really not that much of a threat. Even though when the turtles fight him, they still have a hard time with him, but he's just he makes these quips and one liners, and it's just like, okay, dude, really?
Yeah. Right, and you see too many scenes, but or too many bits behind the scenes where he's Krang's bitch,
Yeah.
and he's just kind of a whiny baby. I don't want to conquer Dimension X. I want to come on. I want to conquer Earth.
Earth, yeah. Yeah, and there are quite a lot of that where he's always complaining about something Krang wants him to do, and like, I don't want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's and then of course even more comical than that are the of course the two henchmen, Bebop and Rocksteady. Speaking of Rhino men,
Yep.
um,
It all ties together, folks.
yes, yes, and you talk about just comically farcical stupid. They're just like, oh gee, boss, I don't know, can we do that? Just
Uh, Hey, boss, what's 2 + 2 again?
yeah. uh but and now granted that is a show, and speaking of something that was made to sell toys,
Hmm.
that show was made to sell toys.
Right. Parents groups were already angry enough at the turtles for being too violent and encouraging kids to make their own nunchucks.
So much so that nunchucks were banned in a few states, and then Michelangelo had to change his weapon.
To a grappling hook, which is actually way deadlier when you think about it, but harder for the kids to make on their own.
Yes.
Um, which is funny that like the most ridiculous turtle was the one with the weapon that got banned, but that's
Yeah.
it's all about replicable violence, I guess.
Yes.
Uh, so that's kind of like the erosion path, where you start off here, and because they show you too often, they make too much of a gag out of you. It's like, oh man, the kids will think it's funny if the Shredder's complaining about this, or hey, what if we had the Shredder defeated by falling into a giant pie?
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure is an actual episode, but if it isn't, it should be.
Yeah, I think that was something similar happened. Yeah.
Right. You eventually degrade the weight of the character's villainy. Oh,
Mhm.
now can you rehabilitate it? Arguably. Um, did you ever see what was the name of that? There was some uh, GI Joe series of shorts they put on Adult Swim about 15 years ago that I think Warren Ellis wrote. Was it called Renegade?
Resolute.
Resolute. That's it. The first thing they did there was they had Cobra Commander deliver a speech uh, where he basically said to kind of set the tone of this series, which actually had blood and violence, and I don't know if any named characters actually died, but like lots of side people did.
Storm Shadow died.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That whole plot with the ninjas was kind of it was there just because they're the most popular characters. They didn't really contribute to the plot at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I watched with some friends a while back who had even less of a attachment to GI Joe than I did. I just liked that short basically, and they basically said, "What was the point of that ninja plot?" Like, I guess because he's the Wolverine of the group, the most popular.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Cobra Commander is giving a lecture, and it's like they're trying to like rehabilitate him. It's like, I played the fool all those years to try and make you show some initiative. Think for yourselves. Well, no more. If you question my orders, I will gut you like a fish.
Yeah.
And for the purposes of that short, he was reasonably competent, and the threat that he was doing was actually like it was still kind of ridiculous sci-fi because I think it was like a weather control satellite or something.
Yeah, it was I actually studied this thing in college. It was called
Really?
yeah, it's called HARP.
Okay.
High
Oh, you meant you studied the thing they
no, the
stole.
the thing that
I
they
was
that
like,
they
what
actually
kind of weird college did you go to where they're having you study GI Joe for anything?
that would have been a fun college to go to.
Yeah.
And, no, yeah, no, I studied the HARP, and I can't remember the acronym. I can't remember what it stood for. High something
Atmosphere.
auroral, whatever. Yeah, and it beams like stuff into the ionosphere. It's like radio stuff. It's very very complicated, but but yeah, it's actually based on a real thing. They used
Hmm.
a real thing as the as the plot device, because there are actually some people like my professor like this professor I had in college who thought that harp could be used for what Cobra Commander, what Cobra was using Heart for in GI Joe Resolute.
Just to completely F with the weather.
Yes. And but yeah, like the Cobra Commander in that was a radical departure from this Cobra Commander.
Morons! I have morons on my payroll!
From the only episode of the original series I've ever bothered to watch, I randomly found Ode to Cobra on like a torrent website or whatever 15 years ago, and I said, you know what? This is all I need to see. This is the peak GI Joe. I've gotten the best experience I'm likely to get from this program because it's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And but I will say, like, with that show, like I think he got to be so comical and or got to be so farcical that they created Serpentor.
Yeah, like the whole point of the movie was Cobra Commander, you're a useless you're a useless wimp. We're inventing a race that sent you out into the world to conquer the earth, and I'm your replacement.
Yes.
Just to try and raise the stakes slightly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like that's the slow erosion. That's actually really easy to fall into.
Yeah.
Especially when you have multiple writers doing something. Like I've always been kind of curious to read the 80s Marvel comics of G.I. Joe based on or written by Larry Hama, just because it sounds like he wrote it continuously for like 150 issues or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually really consistent. I have to imagine that his version of Cobra Commander was not as farcical.
Yeah. I think I think you would be right, and because I watched the toys that made the toys that made us on Netflix. And they did an episode on GI Joe, and they interviewed Larry Hama in the episode. And one of the things he did say was he thought it was really stupid that nobody died in the cartoon show. He thought it was really dumb. He says I believe he called it morally bankrupt.
Wow. Okay. Right. Because of course the objective of the cartoon was to sell toys, and you don't want to kill off somebody's favorite toy.
Right.
They'll stop watching.
Yes.
And want to buy more toys.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can try to turn around an erosion. It works best if you don't erode in the first place, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Or if like you do a little bit of erosion, like you have like, Shredder falls into a giant cream pie when he's trying to conquer the circus one week, but he actually accomplishes something the next.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, that was a one-time thing, or it's a sometimes thing, but he can accomplish things, which is actually a challenge in genre fiction, especially serialized, because you can't exactly have the villain win an episode of that usually.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to do things like, you start. That's actually, I think that's why you usually start the episode with the villain successfully pulling off a heist or an attack or something, because that's like an easy way to show what the villain's about and also to raise their threat level.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh man, this cat burglar totally broke into this place and stole this ancient Egyptian ruby. How is Batman going to stop them from stealing the next one in this set?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or yeah, or I was just when you mentioned that, I just remembered the what was it called? The first episode with Mr. Freeze in
oh man,
Heart of Ice. Is that right?
I think it's Heart of Ice. Yeah.
Heart of Ice. Yeah. In that, when we're introduced to Mr. Freeze, he's he's pulling off a heist, and Batman tries to stop him, but Batman fails. And Batman has to figure out what Freeze is doing, and Freeze is building a giant freeze gun, and then you learn more about Mr. Freeze and why he is the way he is.
Yeah, that one's just a masterful episode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually an example of revitalizing a villain, because he had been in the Adam West cartoon, and then he had barely appeared ever since, because he was basically, hey, what if you had Captain Cold from The Flash but in a stupider costume? Wait, Captain Cold just dresses like a Eskimo, or he wears a parka. How do you make him look stupid? stupider. We found a way.
We found it.
The other thing you can do is you can just have the immediate character assassination.
Mhm.
Now that's actually more rare to have them just completely misread what people like about a villain and just completely screw it up in one go.
Mhm.
It now kind of comes back to what the point of a character is, right?
Mhm.
So an example that I heard about and made me very glad I wasn't reading those particular Batman comics was they had a bit where it turned out that the Mad Hatter was either a lover of cheese pizza himself, or he was just a child, or he was a child trafficker sending it to, he was trafficking in children somehow, and he may have been actually abusing them himself.
Mm.
Which strikes me as like a misguided attempt to take a kind of a goofy villain and try to reverse his reverse erosion and turn him into a bigger threat.
Was this written by Zack Snyder?
Surprisingly, no. I think it might have actually been Dini of all people.
Oh, wow, really? Wow.
I couldn't tell you. I think it was in New 52.
Mm.
I think that was his era. So I kind of, from what I've heard of that Paul Dini New 52 era, it's a good comics, but you almost wonder if he was flexing his wings from not being restricted by children's television rules a little bit too much at times.
Yeah.
Because I do recall a friend telling me about an issue where Poison Ivy was, there was a bean involved, and she was doing that while a man was being eaten by her giant plant. I would have to go back and verify that this happened because he told me about this 10 plus years ago, but still, it's
Oh.
but
Yeah.
yeah. So, anyways, Mad Hatter ruined from that. It's like if you want to use him as a gag villain, he's now ruined for that purpose.
Mhm.
Because if that comic is in continuity, or if that person read that comic, even if it isn't in continuity, now it's like, oh yeah, the abuser, yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine when he's like mind controlling people because apparently there's no lasting consequences of that. But oof,
Yeah.
it's not
Jeez.
fun anymore.
No.
The other assassination, of course, can be what you would do with erosion, but just all at once. So, you could have a character who's trucking along very nicely, everything's going great, and then suddenly you go from being a serious villain to, well, I'm trying to think of a villain who really hasn't been ruined. I guess Doomsday in DC Comics is still pretty intact. The only problem with
Mhm.
Doomsday is that he did his best trick the first time out killing Superman. So anytime he appears after that, if Superman doesn't die, then
Yeah.
it feels like a step down.
Yeah, it's all downhill.
Actually, never mind. That's an awful example now that I think about it, because I remember that they had a storyline before the New 52 where it turned out he was coming back smarter and smarter, but he was kind of ruined because he actually understood what death and pain were.
Oh.
So he could actually feel fear. So even though he was physically stronger, he was like not as much of a berserker. So well, actually, let's talk about Darth Vader just in the context of the original trilogy. We'll just ignore the context that the prequels and the Clone Wars gives you on the character.
Mhm.
So Darth Vader in the original trilogy. So Darth Vader, he shows up. He's the big man. He wades through a bunch of defeated rebels, tosses them around like nothing. He takes out a bunch of X-wings and TIE fighters in that movie. Or X-wings and Y-wings in that movie. Almost wins except for Han Solo showing up at the last possible second.
Mhm.
Then he has to go off and lick his wounds. Second movie, he shows up. He's got the rebels on the run. He's got this big fleet. He's choking people left and right when they displease him.
Mhm.
He kicks Luke's ass and chops his hand off. Third movie, he beats or third movie he loses some. He gets tarnished a bit, but that's just kind of showing how much stronger Luke has gotten,
Mhm.
and also because he's conflicted because he's now kind of forced to. Before he was trying to capture his son. Now it's like he's got to actually kill him,
Mhm.
or it's kill or be killed for a bit there.
Mhm.
So let's look at that villain arc in the first two movies. Now, imagine if at some point, like Empire Strikes Back, they've taken out the shields on Echo Base on Hoth. Vader and a bunch of snowtroopers are invading the base, and suddenly he slips on the ice and falls in its butt. And because he's got a really badly made cyborg body, you wonder if the Emperor ganked him on purpose a little bit. And give me up! God damn it! Get me up! Don't tell anybody you saw this. Like that would just be an immediate like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Now, realistically, do you think he had high tread shoes? No.
No.
Yeah. Would it surprise me if I found out there was behind the scenes footage where the actor actually did slip on the ice in their fake cave and fall down? No, not at all.
No.
But you don't show that on screen because you've taken this guy from being the man in charge to whoopsie doodle.
Yep. Yeah, he goes from Darth Vader to Dark Helmet.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect way to put that. In fact, you could argue that's what happened to Boba Fett in the Return of the Jedi.
Mm. Yeah, they did him dirty in Return of the Jedi. Just kind of like, what? Boba Fett? Where? Jeez.
But villainy is like you're supposed to be this big goal for the hero to achieve. So it's kind of like how some guys can't imagine an attractive woman ever uses the bathroom, and if they ever thought about that too much, they would just like, oh nope, attraction's gone. You're too sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Similar thing, like if you knew that Vader could fall and slip on ice, it's like, you're not cool anymore. Sorry.
Yeah. And it sort of reminded me. It kind of reminds me too, with the Friday the 13th. So I think it was the 8th movie. That's Jason Takes Manhattan, although they're not in Manhattan very much. But they filmed, and when they do get to Manhattan, they are actually in Vancouver. But they did film one scene in Times Square.
That's more than a lot of movies that Vancouver is pretending to be New York.
Yeah, like Rumble in the Bronx. But when they filmed the scene, I watched like a documentary where they're talking about it, and Kane Hodder, who played Jason, said when they were filming in Times Square, he never took the hockey mask off. And because he didn't want to break the illusion for people who were watching them filming it.
Well, that's a lot of that's dedication.
Oh yeah. But that kind of feeds to the same thing where it's like, oh, you see Jason without his hockey mask and he just looks like a guy.
Yeah. Oh, it doesn't even have the scars from the other movies.
Yeah.
Oh, Darth Vader can slip.
Yeah.
Oh, Boba Fett's backpack can malfunction if it's jabbed wrong.
Yes. Although, and George Lucas, I think, did say though that if he had known how popular Boba Fett was, he wouldn't have killed him off like that.
Yeah, which I can only say, were you not? I have to imagine that his toy was a bestseller from step one.
Oh yeah.
So you had that evidence at least.
Mm-hmm. And I don't care what anybody says around there. There was never a rocket firing Boba Fett action figure. He never made it.
Was it a deal where it was like planned at one point and then canceled due to safety?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I thought I'd heard that.
Yeah. They were going to do it, but then what happened was Battlestar Galactica had their own toys that had the rocket fires, and then a kid choked on them. Yeah.
Man, dumb kids putting things where they don't belong. This is why we can't have nice things.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other ways to just assassinate a villain. Like one is to just take a villain and go too evil. because you have villains who have a certain role, and not every villain needs to be Baron von Evil Satan, where
Yes.
they're just completely irredeemable and awful. There's room in especially in a series of the Rogues Gallery for villains of varying levels of seriousness.
Hmm.
It's kind of misguided to take, say, a bit Spider-Man villain like the Kangaroo and turn him into a major crime boss or something. You might say, DB, you're making that up. There was never a Spider-Man villain called the Kangaroo. Au contraire, he was an actual guy who was invented in either the late 60s or early 70s. I remember reading his comic. He was like a bushwhacker who spent some time out in the outback and decided to just follow the kangaroos around and learned their ways and their methods of jumping, and he could jump very high. I feel like Stan Lee or John Romita Jr., whoever did that particular storyline was phoning it a little bit that month, but that's okay.
Yeah.
They can't all be winners.
Yeah.
But once you have a character like the Kangaroo, you understand the lane they're playing in.
Yeah.
And you can try to make them like a little bit more serious, but you wouldn't have them, mailing Spider-Man Mary Jane's hand or something.
Yeah, that would be a little that'd be too far there. I think I have like another kind of character assassination-esque thing. So one of the best Batman comic book runs or best comic book storylines was Hush. And so when they made it into an animated movie, they changed the identity of Hush.
They what?
Yeah. So in the comic book, it's Thomas Elliott.
Right. It's kind of obvious it was Thomas Elliott if you're paying attention while you read it, but
yeah. But in the movie, it's the Riddler.
But was Thomas Elliott in the movie?
Yes, and he gets killed by the Riddler. So Thomas Elliott was never evil in the movie.
Okay, so then how did Thomas Elliott's parents die if he wasn't an evil little shit who got one of them killed?
I don't think they got into it in the movie.
Then what's the point of the character? Why have it to be a red herring?
No, well, I think to be a red herring, but also to give Batman extra motivation to go after Hush. And the other part of it too is they completely just neutered the Riddler. Like they turned him from they kept saying, "Oh, he's a C-list villain." He's like, "What?"
I mean, let's be honest here. Riddler, apparently the Riddler, according to Chuck Dixon thing I was watching, was very rarely used. Like he appeared once in the 40s, and then he just went dormant. And then like a famous actor played him on the Adam West show, and that raised his profile.
Yeah, Frank Gorshin.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so he was kind of a C-list villain, but it almost feels like they're just like overemphasizing that just to make he was hard after all. He was Hush.
Yeah.
That's okay. Just make your own cartoon movie at that point. You just like name it Batman Murderman or something like that, or
yeah.
And it turns out that okay. And wait, okay. So let me ask you this: did the Riddler subtly reveal that he was Hush, and Batman figured it out via riddles, or did Batman just like unmask him after beating him?
Batman figures it out after a while.
But were there riddle type clues that hinted in that he was Hush?
Kind of. I'm trying to remember the movie. I watched it about a year ago, and it was kind of like, yeah, I think he did. What was weird was he would be Riddler and then he would be Hush, so he'd act as the same guy. He'd swap between the two.
Okay, so my problem there is that if he did it, if he wasn't subtly like dropping hints, that like eventually, like, oh my god, uh,
Yeah.
don't he kept dropping piece of paper that said, "Don't say a word," and that was a mockingbird feather. He's hush.
There might have been something like that. I can't remember it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at least he would be if he was like trying to subtly hint at it the whole time and be his own greatest enemy, like always.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Then he's at least being a character, but it's still a stupid retcon.
yeah, I didn't like it. And it well, yeah, because the movie fit into the overarching DC animated movie thing that they were universe that they were doing.
That they reset on Flashpoint.
Well, no, Flashpoint
See me,
reset it.
That they did Flashpoint, then they did the Justice League Dark one with where they just completely crapped on the whole stupid universe they had been making and reset
Right.
it
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
just in time for HBO Max.
Yes. Yeah, Damian Wayne.
Those Damian Wayne movies don't even get, man. That was some character assassination for Wilson Slade, the Terminator, because like that little 13-year-old kid was kicking him around and was dominating all of their fights.
Yeah, that's not right. And even if Slade only has one eye, he could still beat the shit out of that kid.
Right, because and to be fair, Damian Wayne was also kicking around guys who were like 400 pounds of muscle, like knocking them across the room. So that Damian Wayne was superhuman, I guess. I don't know.
Well, he is the grandson of Ra's al Ghul. I mean, maybe.
It still feels like they were trying to make him seem cooler than he actually was.
Yeah, that's true. Instead of an annoying spoiled brat.
I think that's the other thing about it is that the villain is there to make your hero look good ultimately, but you can go too far and it's like, wait, why was this guy a big deal again?
Yeah.
Because the only reason, that movie series is a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I guess what we're saying in closing is, it's easy to slowly erode the character and take him from, or take a villain from something that they started out as, and then turn them into something that they weren't meant to be or weren't before, and then you find yourself with a very farcical or just a shell of a villain.
Yeah, right. Like, wait, oh no, the Rhino's here. What's the big whoop? We beat him casually in the opening of issues all the time.
Yeah.
But this time the Rhino has a plan. You've made him a complete dumbass. What kind of a plan could he possibly have?
Yeah.
Like the actual in Dan Slott's run of the Rhino was actually like a serious character. Every time I read it, it's like, this is not the Rhino. This is not the Rhino at all. I see that what you're trying to do and rehabilitate him, but he's way too well spoken and eloquent.
Yeah, kind of like taking Solomon Grundy and turning him into a Oxford educated man about town.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, so you could kind of you could slowly erode or you could quickly erode what a character is meant to be. And I guess at least my biggest advice is don't chase short-term laughs at a villain's expense.
Mm-hmm.
Like villains, I guess you have a certain amount of badass credit, and you slowly chip away at it. You can replenish it, but if you go tilt, it's really hard to recover from tilt.
Yeah, and it's one thing to have to maybe have a villain like have like a group of villains who they don't get along very well, and one or two of them might be a little crazy or maybe a little dumb.
Mm-hmm.
But if they kind of work together and they kind of unite under like a common thing, you can make it work. Like with like the Legion of Doom, if you will. That's a ragtag, group of villains who are just, they hate each other, but they
They hate everybody else just a little bit more.
exactly, yeah. But yeah, it's yeah, just like DB said, just kind of like, try to have him be, try to give them, try to be as menacing as your story will allow them to be, and just you kind of be mindful of, like you said, like short term laughs, just be careful of that, because you might not be able to recover the villain after that. And hey, D Rhino, good to see you.
Hey, well, I think that's everything we had to say. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah. Hey, no worries, man.
Yep, there's always the replay.
Yes. Do 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 do.
Just watch, I'm gonna sing it too. Well, one of these times it will get copyright struck by whoever owns the song. Although that one might be old enough, it could be public domain, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know if I forget what game shot's even from.
I don't know.
It's very old, but
Yeah.
all right. Looks like we don't have
Right.
any questions. So
Okay.
Yeah. What we talk about next time, as always, last minute plans.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. And of course, Guardian Angel mailing list is in the description down below. All of DB's stuff is down below. Magpie Wizard 3, Storm Wizard, Patreon, all that good stuff. So until then, want to again thank you everybody for joining us, and I will play the trailer for Guardian Angel one last time. So until next week, good night everybody.
Good night.